The Sumerian civilization is one of the oldest and most influential cultures in human history. It originated in southern Mesopotamia, in the area of modern-day Iraq, around 5,000 years ago. The Sumerians were the first to create city-states, organize societies, and laid the foundations for many achievements that became the cornerstones of human civilization. The history of Sumerian civilization begins with the first settlements that laid the foundations for future city-states. These cities were not merely inhabited areas. They were centers of cultural and religious development, where the first ideas about statehood, law, and social structure took root. Eridu is considered the oldest of the Sumerian cities and even one of the oldest cities in the world. According to legends, it was here, on the shores of the Persian Gulf, that the gods established the first human settlement. Eridu was dedicated to the god Enki, the patron of water and wisdom. Archaeological findings show that the city existed as early as the 6th millennium before the Common Era. Around the temple of Enki, a settlement grew, which eventually became a major center of agriculture and craftsmanship. Ur is another of the earliest Sumerian settlements, reaching its peak in the 3rd millennium before the Common Era. The city is known for its monumental ziggurats, temples built in honor of the moon god Nana. Ur was an important center of trade, connecting Mesopotamia with the Persian Gulf and other regions. Crafts flourished here, and the city's cultural heritage included rich royal and priestly tombs, indicating a complex social hierarchy. Uruk, perhaps the most famous Sumerian city, is considered the first metropolis in human history. It was dedicated to the goddess Inanna and became the center of the development of cuneiform writing. It was here that complex administrative structures first appeared, which can be seen as prototypes of the first states. Uruk was surrounded by massive walls, the construction of which is mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The city's population could reach up to 50,000 people, a vast number for that time. In addition to these major centers, other city-states played an important role. Each of them had its own government, army, and religious system. They often competed with one another for resources and power, but at the same time exchanged knowledge and cultural achievements. Nippur, for example, was considered the religious center of all Sumer, housing the temple of the supreme god Enlil. These cities did not simply arise as settlements. They became strongholds of culture and innovation. In them, crafts, architecture, and early forms of governance developed. The Sumerian city-states can be considered the first examples of how people were able to organize society on a higher level. Mesopotamia, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, was not accidentally the cradle of Sumerian civilization. The unique natural conditions and geographic location of this region played a key role in its development and prosperity. The primary reason why the first settlements arose here was the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. They provided the land with a rich layer of silt, making the soil exceptionally fertile. In the hot and arid climate of Mesopotamia, this factor was critically important for agriculture. The Sumerians learned to build complex irrigation systems that allowed them to control the river floods and effectively use water for field irrigation. This ensured stable harvests and led to surplus food production, a crucial condition for the development of cities and social structure. Mesopotamia was located at the crossroads of ancient trade routes. It was a key passage connecting Anatolia, the Iranian plateau, and India. This region was rich in natural resources, and neighboring peoples supplied essential goods. Wood, metals, and precious stones. The Sumerians quickly recognized the importance of trade and became intermediaries between different cultures. The development of economic ties contributed to the growth of cities and the advancement of crafts. The climate of Mesopotamia was quite harsh. Hot summers, little rainfall, and the risk of sudden floods. These challenges forced the Sumerians to develop new technologies and adapt to their environment. They built dams, canals, and reservoirs to control water resources. These engineering achievements laid the foundation for creating more complex infrastructure and contributed to the development of science and mathematics. The religious beliefs of the Sumerians also played an important role. They believed that the gods controlled natural forces and saw the construction of cities and temples as a way to maintain order in the universe. This belief unified society and contributed to the creation of centralized city-states, where rulers were often considered representatives of the gods on earth. Thus, religious motives strengthened the social structure and hierarchy. The fertile land and abundance of food attracted more and more people. Gradually, small settlements expanded, transforming into large cities. The population growth required the creation of new forms of governance and control, which became the foundation for the emergence of the first administrative systems. One of the greatest achievements of Sumerian civilization was the creation of the first irrigation systems. In the arid climate of Mesopotamia, where rainfall was extremely scarce, the development of agriculture depended directly on the ability to control the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Sumerians didn't just adapt to these conditions, they were able to transform them, laying the foundations for the prosperity of their civilization. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers were both a blessing and a threat. On one hand, they provided the fertile silt necessary for agriculture. On the other, their floods were unpredictable and could destroy crops. To tame the natural forces, the Sumerians began building canals, dams, and reservoirs to regulate the flow of water. The first irrigation systems were a complex network of man-made canals that allowed water from the rivers to be directed to the fields. The irrigation system included main canals that carried water from the rivers and smaller branches that distributed it to the fields. An important element were reservoirs, where water was stored in case of drought. Managing this system required coordination and collective labor, which contributed to the formation of an organized society and strengthened the authority of local rulers. Thanks to irrigation, the Sumerians were able to significantly increase agricultural productivity. They grew barley, wheat, millet, and date palms, which provided food and supported large cities. The surplus grain production became the basis for trade. The Sumerians exchanged food for metals, wood, and other scarce resources. The development of irrigation led to the emergence of a social hierarchy. Coordinating large public projects required management and oversight, which strengthened the power of kings and priests. Farmers, craftsmen, and traders became dependent on the functioning of the irrigation system, which contributed to the development of early forms of government and law. The creation of irrigation systems required a deep understanding of mathematics and engineering. The Sumerians developed methods for measuring land areas and water volumes, laying the foundation for the emergence of geometry and the first calendars. Water management also led to the development of law and the first documented regulations governing the use of common resources. Sumerian society had a clear social structure based on a division of labor and a strict hierarchy. Every individual occupied their place in the social pyramid. From kings and priests to craftsmen, farmers, and slaves. This organization ensured stability and efficient governance amid the rapid growth of city-states. At the top of the social ladder was the king-priest, or Lugal. He was not only the political ruler, but also considered a representative of the gods on earth. The Lugal governed the city-state, coordinated the construction of temples and irrigation systems, and was responsible for military campaigns. His power was absolute, as the Sumerians believed the king held a divine mandate. An important part of his duties was to maintain harmony between the gods and humans, emphasizing the sacred nature of his authority. Beneath the king was the nobility, consisting of high-ranking priests, officials, and military leaders. Priests played a key role in Sumerian society. They managed temples, organized religious rituals, and oversaw large economic enterprises owned by the temples. The priestly class held immense power and influence, as the Sumerians believed the city's prosperity depended on the favor of the gods. Military leaders and officials were responsible for the city's defense, tax collection, and oversight of public works. Members of the nobility often owned large plots of land and had access to resources and wealth, which strengthened their position in society. The middle class of society consisted of craftsmen and merchants. They played an important role in the economy of Sumerian cities. Craftsmen specialized in making pottery, textiles, weapons, jewelry, and other household items. The high level of craftsmanship of the Sumerians is well known through archaeological discoveries. Pottery, metal, and stone artifacts demonstrate remarkable precision and aesthetics. Merchants facilitated the exchange of goods both within the city and beyond its borders. Through their activities, the Sumerians maintained trade connections with neighboring regions, including the Iranian Plateau, Anatolia, and even the Indus Valley. The majority of the population in Sumerian cities were farmers. They engaged in agriculture and livestock breeding, providing food for the city. Their labor formed the foundation of the Sumerian economy. However, farmers had little influence and were dependent on the ruling elite. They paid taxes, a portion of which went to support the temples and the royal court, and participated in public works, such as the construction of canals and city walls. At the lowest level of the social pyramid were slaves. They were often prisoners of war or individuals who could not pay off their debts. Their labor was used in construction projects, in the estates of the elite, and in temples. Despite their difficult situation, some slaves could gain their freedom and even hold lower positions in society. However, the majority of slaves remained powerless and completely dependent on their masters. This strict division into social layers allowed Sumerian society to maintain order and manageability within a complex hierarchy. Each layer played its role, ensuring the functioning of city-states and the preservation of their power. Temples in Sumerian cities played a central role not only in religious life, but also in political, economic, and social spheres. The priesthood was a crucial element of the Sumerian hierarchy, and its influence extended far beyond the confines of temples and religious practices. The temple was not only a place of worship for the gods, but also a political, economic, and cultural center. In each major Sumerian urban community, there was a central temple dedicated to one of the city's main gods. These temples were typically massive structures with thick walls and towers known as ziggurats, stepped pyramids where religious ceremonies were held. Each temple was an independent entity, often owning vast land holdings, livestock, slaves, and rich reserves of grain and other goods. The temple economy played a crucial role in daily life. The land holdings managed by the priests provided food and financial support for the entire city. Priests in Sumerian society held exceptional influence. They were considered intermediaries between humans and gods, and their decisions embodied divine will. The priesthood was involved not only in religious rituals but also in political affairs, making it an essential element of state governance. For instance, priests often assisted kings in addressing crucial matters, such as land distribution, tax collection, and even the appointment of rulers. The priestly class was also involved in military campaigns and controlled key sectors of the economy. They managed the irrigation system, which required extensive knowledge and expertise, ensuring the proper use of water resources for agriculture. The religious practices of the Sumerians were closely tied to agriculture and the life cycle of the city. The most significant events in religious life coincided with the planting and harvesting seasons. Priests led rituals that, according to the Sumerians, helped ensure good harvests and prosperity. Each city had its own patron deity, to whom sacrifices and ceremonies were offered. The religious practices of the Sumerians were closely tied to agriculture and the life cycle of the city. The most significant events in religious life coincided with the planting and harvesting seasons. Priests led rituals that, according to the Sumerians, helped ensure good harvests and prosperity. Each city had its own patron deity, to whom sacrifices and ceremonies were offered. Priests also played a key role in the development of writing and education. In ancient Mesopotamia, writing was closely linked to the temples. It was here that the first cuneiform tablets were created, recording religious texts, laws, trade transactions, and administrative acts. Sumerian priests used these records to manage temple property, collect taxes, and also to create astronomical and mathematical tables. Priests often became the custodians of knowledge, with their education covering a wide range of disciplines, from theology and astronomy to medicine and mathematics. They were the first scientists and intellectuals of their time, and their knowledge laid the foundation for the development of Sumerian civilization. The priesthood had a profound influence on social relations and the internal structure of cities. These individuals were not only religious leaders, but also social connectors. They could intervene in family matters, help resolve conflicts, and conduct trials. At times, priests acted as state advisors, and in some cases, they themselves became rulers. Additionally, the temple system employed hundreds of workers, craftsmen, and even slaves who facilitated the essential activities of the temples, from construction to the processing of offerings brought by the worshippers. The Sumerian civilization, despite its ancient origins, left an indelible mark on human history through its achievements in various fields of science and culture. One of the most significant contributions of the Sumerians was the invention of key concepts that laid the foundation for subsequent civilizations. Among these were writing, mathematics, and astronomy. One of the greatest achievements of the Sumerians was the invention of cuneiform, one of the earliest writing systems in human history. This script emerged around 3500 before the Common Era and was initially used for keeping economic records. The name cuneiform comes from the distinctive wedge-shaped marks made on clay tablets using a sharp tool. The Sumerians used these symbols to record a variety of information, ranging from trade and property accounts to laws and myths. Cuneiform evolved over many centuries, and by around 2000, before the Common Era, it had become a more complex and diverse writing system. The symbols gradually transformed from simple pictograms into logograms and syllables, allowing for a broader representation of speech and thought. This development significantly expanded the scope of written communication, making it possible to record not just practical information, but also complex ideas, stories, and legal codes. Sumerian writing played a crucial role in the development of administration, law, and the preservation of cultural heritage. It was passed on to other peoples of Mesopotamia, and cuneiform continued to be used in the region until the beginning of our era. Among the surviving texts are the famous epics, laws, religious texts, as well as scientific and mathematical records. These writings not only provide insight into the daily life of the Sumerians, but also offer a glimpse into their beliefs, governance, and intellectual achievements, shaping the foundation for later civilizations. Mathematics in Sumerian civilization also reached significant heights. The Sumerians used a base 60 numerical system, known as the sexagesimal system. This system had a profound impact on the development of mathematics and astronomy. It led to the creation of convenient methods for measuring time, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, and angles, which are still in use today. The Sumerians' advanced understanding of numbers and their ability to apply this system to practical and scientific problems laid the groundwork for future mathematical and astronomical discoveries across ancient civilizations. The Sumerians applied mathematics to solve practical problems, such as managing agriculture, building irrigation systems, and constructing temples. They developed tables for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, as well as for calculating square and cube roots. This reflects the advanced level of their mathematical education and knowledge. They also developed a system for measuring areas and volumes, which was used in land ownership and architecture. The Sumerians paid great attention to observing celestial bodies and developed precise methods for their study. They identified several planets, including Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, and created calendars based on the cycles of the moon and the sun. This allowed them to predict seasonal changes, which was critically important for agriculture. The Sumerians also studied the movement of planets and stars, linking them to religious beliefs. Each city-state had its own patron god, whose image was often associated with a specific planet. Astronomical knowledge was used to create religious calendars and predictions, which influenced daily life and social organization. In addition, the Sumerians created astronomical tables that allowed them to predict solar and lunar eclipses, as well as astronomical phenomena such as the rising and setting of planets. The religion of the Sumerians was polytheistic, centered around a divine pantheon composed of numerous deities, each endowed with its own power and specialization. These gods embodied the forces of nature, essential life phenomena, and the cosmos. Each Sumerian city-state was assigned its own patron deity, yet among all the deities, there were prominent figures whose myths and roles in Sumerian religious practices held the greatest influence. Anu was the supreme god of the Sumerian pantheon, embodying celestial authority. His name literally means sky or heavenly space, and he was regarded as the principal deity in the Sumerian religious system. Anu was the god of ultimate authority, a symbol of the boundless cosmos and order. Although he was known for his detachment from human affairs, he had the power to grant rulers the right to govern. He was most often depicted as a great entity seated on a throne, gazing down upon the world from the heavens. While Anu wielded limitless power, his role in myths was largely symbolic, with his functions often carried out by other gods. Enlil, the son of Anu, was one of the most revered gods in Sumerian mythology. He was the god of air, wind, and storms, and his power was associated with the cyclical and dynamic nature of the elements. Enlil was also the god of authority and governance, credited with creating order in the world. He held a central position in Sumerian religious beliefs, wielding dominion over the earth, the atmosphere, and all living beings. Enlil was regarded as the patron of Sumerian kings and the overseer of human affairs, with his decisions often carrying profound consequences for the entire nation. Inanna, also known as Ishtar in the Akkadian tradition, was one of the most prominent figures in Sumerian mythology. She personified love, fertility, as well as war and destruction. Inanna was a goddess of both virtue and ferocity, and her actions in myths often reflected contradictions. She served as the patroness of love and passion, while simultaneously embodying war and conflict. The myth of Inanna's union with her husband Dumuzi, a shepherd who later became a symbol of fertility and the cycles of nature, is among the most renowned stories in Sumerian mythology. Inanna is also associated with the concept of ascent and descent, which is vividly depicted in the myth of her journey to the underworld to confront the goddess Ereshkigal. This myth symbolized the idea of life cycles and the transmigration of souls. Apart from the principal figures, the Sumerian pantheon included numerous other deities, each with specific functions. Among these were Ninurta, the god of war and hunting, Shamash, the god of the sun and justice, Nana, the moon god, Gishizida, the god of mountains and destruction, Ningal, the goddess of fertility, and many others. Each of these deities played a crucial role in the daily lives of the Sumerians. Every city-state in Mesopotamia had its patron gods, and the inhabitants worshipped the deity most closely associated with their economy, environment, and needs. This pantheon of gods reflected the Sumerians' perception of the world as a place where divine forces and natural elements had a direct impact on their lives, well-being, and destiny. The Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the greatest works of Sumerian literature and an essential source that offers a glimpse into the world of ancient Sumerians, revealing their cultural values, worldview, and way of life. Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, is portrayed in the epic as a hero possessing superhuman strength. Yet he also grapples with deeply human challenges, such as the quest for immortality, friendship, and the meaning of life. This epic embodies the core ideas and values that held significance for Sumerian society. One of the main themes of the epic is the search for immortality. Gilgamesh, endowed with great strength and power, experiences fear of death, and after the loss of his friend Enkidu, decides to embark on a journey to discover the secret of immortality. This motif of seeking eternal life was significant for the Sumerians, as they believed in life after death, but also recognized that immortality was an illusion for humans. The plot of the epic shows how Gilgamesh, despite all his efforts, cannot achieve immortality. He finds wisdom in realizing that death is inevitable, and that although life is short, a person can leave a lasting impact on the world through their actions and achievements. This idea emphasizes the importance of personal virtue and contribution to the development of civilization, rather than the pursuit of physical infinity. One of the most striking aspects of the epic is the story of the friendship between Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Enkidu, a wild man, finds his brother in Gilgamesh, and their friendship becomes the foundation of the epic's plot. These relationships highlight the importance of partnership and mutual assistance in difficult times. Initially, Gilgamesh lives as a tyrant, and his people suffer. But after meeting Enkidu, he becomes a more mature and understanding person. The friendship with Enkidu also helps Gilgamesh realize that what matters most is not personal strength or power, but close relationships with others. After Enkidu's death, Gilgamesh experiences profound loss, which demonstrates how important such connections are to human existence. This theme of friendships that support and help in difficult times is undoubtedly one of the cultural values of Sumerian society. Gilgamesh in the epic is not just a hero, but also a king. And his role in society highlights the importance of leadership and responsibility. At the beginning of the poem, he is depicted as a cruel ruler who abuses his power, causing his people to suffer. However, the journey, encounters with wise beings, and the deep grief after Enkidu's death change his perspective. He comes to realize that true power of a ruler lies not in strength, but in the ability to care for his people, protect them, and guide them towards prosperity. The Epic of Gilgamesh also emphasizes the importance of wisdom and making decisions for the benefit of society. At this point, Gilgamesh learns to be more just, and his transformation reflects the ideal of a good ruler as envisioned by the Sumerians. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods also play a crucial role, intervening in the lives of humans, either helping or punishing them. The goddess Ishtar, for example, plays a key role in the tragedy of Enkidu, while the sun god Shamash offers assistance to Gilgamesh in his journey. The relationships with the gods and the natural world were an important part of Sumerian culture, and the poem reflects this interaction. The Sumerians believed that the gods controlled many aspects of life, and that a person's fate was often determined by the will of the deities. However, the Epic of Gilgamesh also emphasizes that human will and actions can alter one's fate, reflecting the values of personal responsibility and the pursuit of self-improvement inherent in Sumerian culture. In the end of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero realizes that immortality is unattainable, and that his true legacy lies not in the quest for eternal life, but in his deeds and actions. The death of Enkidu teaches him to accept the inevitability of death, and his return home symbolizes the realization of the value of human life and the importance of leaving a mark in history. The epic teaches that, despite the transience of human life, each person can leave a legacy in the world through good deeds, wise decisions, and helping others. The city-states, or nomes, that emerged on the territory of Mesopotamia became the foundation of the political and social structure of Sumerian civilization. These cities were not part of a unified, centralized state, as we are accustomed to seeing in later eras, but rather independent and autonomous political entities, each with its own laws, rulers, and administrative structures. However, despite their independence, they exchanged cultural, economic, and political ideas, which contributed to the overall development of the region. The Sumerian city-states began to form around the 4th millennium before the Common Era, when the first permanent settlements began to appear in the region of Mesopotamia. In these settlements, agriculture, trade, and crafts developed, which in turn contributed to population growth and the need for more complex social and political structures. Cities like Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Eridu, and others became centers of political, cultural, and economic life. Each of these cities was an independent political entity with its own territory and governing institutions. At the same time, every city-state was closely connected to religion, as the temple often served as the center of both religious and political life, with the priesthood playing a crucial role in governance. Each Sumerian city-state, or province, was led by a ruler who often held the title of Lugal, which indicated his role in governing society. This ruler was not only a military leader, but also the head of the state administration, as well as the embodiment of divine will on earth. In some cases, the ruler's title could be confirmed through a special divine blessing, emphasizing the sacred nature of his authority. City-states were also divided into various administrative units, often referred to as nomes. These nomes were small territorial units, each led by a leader responsible for managing resources, collecting taxes, and organizing labor. Judicial functions were also carried out within the nomes, including resolving disputes and protecting the rights of citizens. Although the Sumerian city-states were independent, they often interacted with each other, both in times of peace and during periods of conflict. In times of peace, there was active trade between cities, as well as the exchange of technologies and cultural values. For example, cuneiform writing developed in Uruk, soon spreading throughout Mesopotamia, along with other achievements of Sumerian culture. However, relations between the cities were not always peaceful. Conflicts over territory, water resources, and trade routes were also a part of life in these cities. This led to the emergence of regular military campaigns, in which not only the army, but also the priesthood participated, using religious justifications for conquests and the expansion of influence. One of the distinguishing features of the Sumerian city-states was the influence of religion on political life. Temples in these cities played not only a religious, but also an economic and political role. The temples stored vast resources, grain, livestock, metals, as well as manufactured goods that could be used in trade. Temple leaders generally held significant political power, and priests played important roles in governance, management, and justice. Thus, the Sumerian city-states were closely tied to religion, with the temple and the priesthood serving as important centers of power. An example of such influence is Lagash, where the priesthood played a key role in governance, labor organization, and legislative activities. Throughout their history, Sumerian city-states underwent several stages of development. In the early stages, the cities were small and independent, with local rulers and limited territories. However, with the development of irrigation systems, population growth, and the expansion of external trade, the cities began to grow and strengthen. By the end of the 3rd millennium before our era, the Sumerian city-states began merging into larger political entities, leading to the formation of the first unions and coalitions. These processes were not peaceful. They were often accompanied by wars and conflicts, but they also stimulated political and cultural integration. The formation of the first city-states in Mesopotamia laid the foundation for the creation of complex social, economic, and political structures that continued to evolve in the centuries that followed. The city-states, with their autonomy and interdependence, played a key role in establishing the first legal norms, and their influence remained significant throughout the history of the ancient Near East. The Code of Laws of Ur-Nammu is one of the greatest legal achievements in the history of ancient civilizations and represents the first known collection of laws preserved to this day. This code was created around 2,100 years before our era, during the reign of the Sumerian king Ur-Nammu, who ruled the city-state of Ur. It is considered one of the earliest examples of a legal system based on written norms. During the reign of Ur-Nammu, significant socioeconomic changes took place in Mesopotamia, and social relations became increasingly complex. By this time, Sumerian civilization had already reached a high level of development, and with the advancement of trade, crafts, and agriculture, the need to regulate social relations became increasingly urgent. As a ruler, Ur-Nammu recognized the importance of establishing clear rules to maintain order and justice in his kingdom. The code was written on clay tablets using cuneiform script, and although only fragments of this document have survived, the preserved portions provide valuable insight into the legal norms of that time. The Code of Ur-Nammu consists of 57 articles that regulate various aspects of ancient society. This legal code covers a wide range of social relations, from issues of property and trade to punishments for crimes. The main goal of the code was to establish justice and protect the rights of citizens, including the rights of both free people and slaves. A notable feature of the code is that it lacks the harsh punishments typical of other ancient legal systems, such as the Code of Hammurabi. Instead of severe penalties, Ur-Nammu preferred to use fines as a form of punishment for crimes. For example, if someone committed theft, they were required to pay a fine rather than undergo physical punishment. The Code of Ur-Nammu was based on the principles of justice and equality, with special attention given to the protection of the weaker and more vulnerable segments of the population, such as the poor and slaves. Some of the law's articles regulated family relations, including marriage, divorce, and inheritance rights. For example, it specified the rights of women to property in the event of a divorce. Special attention was also given to regulating relationships between people in commerce and trade. Violating trade agreements or engaging in illicit trading could result in fines or monetary payments. In this context, the code was an important tool for establishing economic stability within the city-state. The punishments for crimes under the Code of Ur-Nammu primarily involved monetary fines. For example, for murder, a person was required to pay a fine rather than face execution. There were also penalties for various types of violence, theft, and even corruption. This demonstrates the progressive nature of the code for its time, as it was not based on blood revenge, but on principles of compensating for damages. The Code of Laws of Ur-Nammu holds immense historical significance as it laid the foundation for later legal systems in the Near East. Although its provisions were not as detailed as those in later laws, such as the Code of Hammurabi, it nevertheless established the groundwork for the development of subsequent legal systems. It also proved to be an important tool for strengthening the ruler's power and maintaining order in society. By emphasizing the need for justice and equality of citizens' rights, the code ensured stability in the kingdom of Ur and helped minimize social conflicts that inevitably arise in complex societies. The Code of Ur-Nammu had a significant influence on the legal systems that emerged later, including the Code of Hammurabi. Many of its principles, such as the use of fines as punishment, the protection of property and people's rights, and the existence of a judicial system for resolving disputes, were adopted from this early code. Some scholars believe that the Code of Ur-Nammu may be the origin of the idea that the law should be established for society as a whole and be accessible to all citizens, not just the privileged classes. The simplicity and fairness of the Code of Ur-Nammu in the application of punishments, as well as its attention to social issues such as the protection of women's rights and the poor, make it an important historical monument and a foundation for further legal reforms. In the history of Sumerian civilization, one of the key factors that determined political and social dynamics was the competition between city-states for resources, territory, and influence. These conflicts often led to wars and the formation of short-term alliances, which in turn created the instability characteristic of Mesopotamian city-states. Sumerian city-states such as Ur, Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur were located in the fertile valley between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Despite the richness of the land, water resources such as rivers and irrigation canals played a crucial role in sustaining the population. The cities needed to control water sources to maintain agriculture and irrigation. The competition for control over these water sources often became the cause of conflicts between neighboring cities. Throughout the history of Sumerian states, rivers and canals were sources of both prosperity and disasters, such as floods or droughts, which also influenced external economic relations. In addition to water, another important cause of conflicts was the desire to control natural resources, such as building materials, wood, stone, clay, and metals, such as copper. These resources were not always abundant within the territory of a single city-state, and therefore, cities often waged wars to capture lands rich in natural resources. Moreover, economic interests in trade played a significant role in conflicts. Trade between city-states was an integral part of their existence, and the competition for control over trade routes often became a cause of wars. Cities like Ur and Uruk, due to their strategic location, were able to control important trade routes connecting Mesopotamia with other regions of the Middle East. Armed clashes frequently occurred between city-states, aimed at capturing territories or resources. These conflicts could range from large-scale military campaigns to localized skirmishes. In some cases, cities formed alliances to oppose a common enemy, but such alliances were often temporary and unstable. An example of such wars is the conflict between Lagash and Umma, two neighboring cities, which lasted for many years. Lagash, under the strong rule of its king, Eannatum, managed to achieve victory in this struggle, strengthening its position in a resource-rich territory and establishing influence over the neighboring Umma. Military conflicts between Sumerian city-states were accompanied by the development of military organization and tactics. The Sumerians employed well-organized armies consisting of infantry, chariots, and cavalry, utilizing various tactics in battles. Special attention was given to siege preparation, reflecting the advanced engineering knowledge of the time. There were also special groups, such as mercenaries, who were hired for defense or attack. Siege techniques and the use of massive defensive structures, such as walls and fortresses, were an important part of military campaign strategies. Conflicts between city-states had long-term consequences. After a victory in war, the captured territories became part of the victorious state, leading to a redistribution of population and resources. In some cases, the defeated cities were forced to pay tribute to the victors, ensuring a steady flow of wealth into the treasury of the city-state. However, despite victories, wars often led to the weakening of the internal structure of the state, resource depletion, and demographic losses, which could affect political stability. For example, excessive militarization and constant warfare could undermine the economy, reducing agricultural production and trade. Although wars and conflicts in Sumerian civilization became an integral part of political life, they also played a key role in the development of culture and technology. Military confrontations stimulated the advancement of weaponry, fortifications, and engineering solutions. Struggles for resources pushed cities to improve their irrigation systems, as well as to create more efficient methods of agriculture and trade. The economy of Sumerian civilization was multifaceted and developed under the influence of geographical and climatic conditions, as well as social and cultural factors. The foundation of the Sumerian economy lay in agriculture, animal husbandry, and crafts, with each of these sectors playing a unique role in sustaining the viability of the city-states of Mesopotamia. Agriculture was the primary source of wealth and stability for the Sumerian city-states. The Sumerians mastered irrigation techniques, which enabled them to successfully cultivate crops in the arid climate of Mesopotamia. Irrigation systems, including canals and dams, formed the foundation for increased crop yields. Farmers utilized the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to create artificial oases, ensuring stable harvests. The main crops were barley, wheat, dates, and vegetables such as onions, garlic, and beans. Barley, in particular, was a key product in the economy, used not only for food, but also for the production of beer, one of the staple beverages of the Sumerians. Agriculture occupied a significant portion of the population, and labor on the fields was labor-intensive, requiring coordinated effort, which in turn influenced the social structure of society. Animal husbandry also played an important role in the Sumerian economy, although it was secondary to agriculture. The main types of livestock raised by the Sumerians included sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. Animals were used for transportation as well as sources of food, milk, wool, and leather. Oxen were used as draft animals for plowing the fields, while donkeys served to transport goods. Animal husbandry was closely linked to agriculture. For example, the manure produced by animals was used as fertilizer, improving the soil for farming. Milk and meat, as well as wool and leather, fulfilled the needs of the local population and were important commodities in trade. The Sumerians made significant progress in the development of crafts, and their products were known far beyond Mesopotamia. In craft workshops, items were produced from metal, clay, wood, and stone. Among the popular crafts were blacksmithing, weaving, pottery, and jewelry making. The Sumerians became famous for their high-quality goods, such as gold jewelry, bronze weapons and utensils, ceramics, and textiles. Pottery held a special place in the economy of the Sumerians. They crafted dishes, amphorae, and containers used both for everyday needs and for storing goods such as grain and oils. Weaving was also highly developed. The Sumerians produced textile items like fabrics and carpets, which were exported to other regions. Sumerian craftsmen, through the goods they produced, played a crucial role in the development of trade. Crafted products, along with agricultural goods, became the primary exports of the Sumerians. Through trade, the Sumerians established connections with neighboring regions such as Elam, Dilmun, the Indus Valley, and even Egypt. In exchange for their goods, the Sumerians received metals like copper and tin, as well as timber, stone, and precious gems. Labor activities in Sumer were organized according to the social structure of the society. Farmers and herders made up the majority of the population, while craftsmen and merchants engaged in more specialized activities. Craft workshops were often located near major temples or palaces, indicating that many of the crafted goods were intended for the needs of temple cults or the palace elite. However, hired labor also played an important role in the Sumerian economy. Slaves, who were largely employed in agriculture, construction, and craft production, made up a significant portion of the workforce. The government, in turn, controlled the distribution of land and resources, which had a substantial impact on the social and economic conditions of the population's lives. Trade was a crucial component of the Sumerian civilization's economy, and its development ensured the prosperity of the city-states of Mesopotamia. The Sumerians actively traded not only with their neighbors, but also with more distant regions, establishing economic connections that facilitated the spread of cultural and technological achievements. As a result of trade, the Sumerians obtained valuable resources that were not available in Mesopotamia and exchanged their goods, including agricultural products, crafted items, and textiles. One of the most important aspects of Sumerian trade was their connection with the Indus Valley, which covers present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. Through trade routes that traversed both land and sea, the Sumerians exchanged their goods for high-quality products, such as precious stones, Indian ivory, as well as spices and textiles. Indian goods, such as carmine stones and gems, were highly valued in Mesopotamia and the Sumerians actively used them in the production of jewelry and amulets. In exchange, the Sumerians exported their metalworks, such as bronze and gold jewelry, as well as textiles, including wool and linen fabrics, to India. The Sumerians could also obtain exotic goods from Indian traders, such as spices and fragrant oils, which were highly sought after for cooking and ritual practices. This mutual cooperation strengthened trade routes and facilitated cultural exchanges between the two great civilizations. The Sumerians also maintained active trade with Egypt, although on a smaller scale compared to their trade with India. The primary goods exchanged between the Sumerians and the Egyptians included grain, textiles, and metal products, while Egypt supplied Mesopotamia with valuable items such as timber, gold, and building stones. The Sumerians were particularly interested in Egyptian building materials, such as stone and timber, as they lacked these resources themselves. In exchange, the Sumerians traded their crafted goods, such as jewelry, pottery, tools, and textiles made from local materials. While direct trade between Mesopotamia and Egypt may have been limited by geographic and political barriers, this exchange helped to foster the growth of the trade across the ancient Near East. The Sumerians also maintained strong trade connections with regions located in modern-day Turkey, particularly with Anatolia, where numerous trade colonies, such as Kanesh, were established. This area was rich in valuable minerals, including copper and tin, which were essential for bronze production. The trade of metals between the Sumerians and the people of Anatolia became one of the most important components of the Sumerian foreign trade network. The Sumerians also exchanged agricultural products, such as grain and fruits, as well as crafts, such as textiles and pottery, with the Anatolians. This mutual cooperation between the Sumerians and the Anatolians strengthened trade networks and facilitated the spread of new technologies and cultural practices. Trade between the Sumerians in these regions was not limited to land routes alone. The Sumerians actively used the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to transport goods and also developed maritime trade. Due to its location at the crossroads of crucial trade routes, Mesopotamia became an important trade hub, connecting various parts of the ancient world. Trade routes through the Persian Gulf led to India and the Arabian Peninsula, while routes through the Mediterranean and Black Seas connected the Sumerians with the peoples of Egypt, Anatolia, and further with European cultures. This created a powerful network of mutual exchanges through which not only goods, but also ideas, technologies, and cultural influences flowed. The Sumerians were among the first peoples to develop a system of weights and measures, which played a key role in organizing the economy, trade, and governance. Through this system, they were able to standardize various processes, improving the efficiency of agriculture, crafts, and commerce. For measuring length, the Sumerians used various units based on natural objects in daily life. The most well-known unit of length was the fist, about 7 inches, which is thought to have been the length of a clenched hand. However, the more widely used unit was the scale, which equaled the length of one step, approximately 20 inches. There was also the unit sag, which was equal to 6 scales and was about 10 feet. The Sumerians also used the width of a wheel as a unit of measurement, reflecting the importance of transportation for movement and trade. These units of length allowed for the standardization of building sizes, structures, as well as goods, such as fabrics and construction materials. Units of mass, such as the shekel, approximately 0.3 ounces or 8.5 grams, became the foundation for goods exchange and labor calculations. The shekel was widely used in trade and transactions with artisans, farmers, and merchants. For larger measurements, the unit mina was used, which equaled approximately 17.6 ounces or 500 grams. These units of mass were used not only for weighing goods, but also for calculations in agriculture, where precise measurement of grain and other produce was critical for trade and storage. To measure volume, the Sumerians used the standard unit sila, which was approximately equal to the volume of 1 liter or 0.260 thousandths. This unit was used to measure liquids such as wine, oil, and other agricultural products. Larger units included the barrel and canal, which were used for calculating the volumes of grain and other bulk goods. This system of volume measurements was particularly important for agriculture and inventory management, as well as for trade, since merchants required precise data to determine the quantity of goods. The Sumerian system of measures and weights gradually spread and influenced other civilizations, such as the Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian. These units of measurement became the foundation for subsequent mathematical and trade systems in the ancient Near East. The Sumerians also began using writing to record measures and weights, which allowed for efficient tracking of inventory and financial transactions. The Sumerians became the founders of many elements that later became integral parts of human history, such as writing, laws, religious practices, and trade. Their achievements in mathematics, astronomy, and craftsmanship continued to inspire other cultures for centuries. History is always by our side, shaping our present and inspiring our future. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. See you on new adventures through the pages of history.